Welcome to the Tech Flash. If you're looking to increase your ed tech knowledge that's quick and easy to listen to, you have come to the right place. Let's join our host Josh and see what today's episode is all about.
Hello and welcome. Welcome to the Tech Flush. And listen, first and foremost, before we get diving in today, thank y'all for listening. Thank y'all for tuning in, for hitting that subscribe button, leaving all your fancy comments. It's just phenomenal. But listen, we've got a big things are happening for episode number 38. So not only am I coming to you on Spotify, Apple, all those fun things, but we're also going to highlight the video today. So I hope you're excited about that. I think it's going to be awesome. And so for today's show, we've got a big special guest. And I'm excited to introduce you to Dr. Soren Rosier. How's it going?
It's going fantastic. Happy to be here.
Awesome, man. I'm so glad we got connected. So glad that you're here. And we're going to highlight something incredible things you're doing. Now, before we get started, go ahead and kind of introduce yourself, kind of tell us how you fit in to the educational space.
Yeah, for sure. So I began as a teacher. I was a middle school teacher. And then I jumped from there to research world. And as a researcher, I was at a place called SRI, which was formerly the Stanford Research Institute. And then it disaffiliated from Stanford. Now it's just SRI, but it doesn't stand for anything. And when I was over there, I did all different kinds of research, and a lot of it involved evaluating ed tech products that exist in schools. And, the resounding feeling was one of disappointment in general, that all of the wonderful things that technology was promising to do for kids, I was finding that when I was actually seeing things live in classrooms, a lot of kids were struggling. There was a lot of frustration and a lot of disappointment. And so from there, I went into my PhD program at Stanford to learn how to build better technology, primarily technology that serves as a way to make kids have better interactions with each other in the real world. So I think that social learning is really important and better than just pure screen-based learning. And yeah, that's what brought me to what I'm currently doing, which is I work on a platform called PeerTeach, and it sets up math classrooms to do peer tutoring. It takes all the power that exists from having like a traditional adult tutor coming into a classroom, all those benefits, but you get it from your kids teaching each other. And yeah, I've been loving it. We've been around for a couple years now as an organization working, with schools. But before that, there was many years of research out of Stanford that led to what we currently do.
Yeah, awesome. And I know we were getting ready to transition there. Perfect, to PeerTeach and creating that. And I love, and to be honest with you, I didn't know a whole bunch about that before we got connected. And so as I'm diving in, researching it, it's really just a fascinating program that's really built around this peer component. There's parts where they're taking like an assignment, they're taking a quiz, they're formulating all their math concepts. But it's really part of it that I really love is just that training aspect for that peer tutoring. So kind of walk us through that step. How does that really work? Because I know like in the program itself, it's training these kids instead of an adult. So kind of give us some insight on how that's built and really how students are benefiting from that.
Yeah, for sure. So we do three main things. The first is that we train every kid in a math class to be an effective peer tutor. So when any opportunity arises where one kid can help another kid with their learning, they know effective learning strategies. They know the basics of what it means to be a teacher. The second step is we do these little micro assessments to figure out every kid's specific strengths and weaknesses, the areas where they need help. And then we use that data to strategically pair kids up into the just right peer tutoring matches. And then once kids are sitting next to each other in a classroom, the third step is that we facilitate the process of kids coaching each other. So we hold their hand, we scaffold peer tutoring, fun peer tutoring, gamified activities where the kids enjoy it. They do a great job of teaching each other, and they see a ton of learning benefit.
Yeah, and especially with that peer tutoring, and coaching them up, and it takes some time for that buy-in from them, because I can remember I went through a program with Jill Jackson, and a lot of it was that peer interaction. And at first, being a middle school teacher, yes, we're raising our hands, we're think, peering, and sharing, all those important things. But really, you've got to coach those kids and how to do it and be effective. Because I know from my experience, when they first started doing it, they're not wanting to talk to each other. They're really not, again, like buying into this idea. But I know the more that I pushed them, the more that we practiced it, you really saw some good gains and growth from them in being able to talk to the peers that they really like, and then those peers they were more resistant to work with. And that's huge, because now you're working across the room with all sorts of peers. And I love that idea and that concept of it, and implementing that on a classroom on a daily basis.
Yeah, for sure. And I will say that using some traditional models of setting kids up to help each other, it can take time for kids to get excited about it and to love the process of helping each other. But when you figure out the right ingredients to put in front of kids, the right kind of motivating ingredients, a lot of them, very first session, they'll be pumped. And if it's helpful, I can describe what some of those features were that we figured out in the early days to make sure that kids are excited to do it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, let's kind of dive through it from the early days until you are now, because I know everything that we do is a process, and we're going to talk a little bit later about this theories of change, this paper that you co-wrote, and just really kind of work us through that system.
yeah, for sure. One of the early findings from one of our big research studies. This is with schools that are in the San Francisco Bay Area, south of Stanford. That's as much as I can share, because there's some anonymity with who the schools are. But one of the big finding was when you're training kids on effective peer coaching strategies, it really helps to situate them next to the kid that they're going to be doing peer coaching work with, so that they can develop their own set of norms. You want to introduce to them, here's what are effective strategies, effective norms, so that they can kind of imbibe those together. But then you want to give them a chance to talk to each other about it and actually practice teaching virtual characters together using specific learning strategies. And that way, when both kids understand how peer coaching works and what it means to help someone else, the kid who's being coached, they don't have that weird reaction of like, why are you asking me so many questions? Why aren't you just giving me the answer? Why are you scaffolding in this particular way? Because they both understand kind of the mechanics of how really good learning works. And so that was the first finding. It's like it's important to have kids situated together and norming together. Another thing we found is that over time, like kids don't want to just keep helping others without kind of receiving something in return. And the thing that kids want to receive the most, the thing that's most valuable to them, is having concrete evidence that all of their hard work paid off, and that other kid that they were working with really learned that thing that they were working on. And so we work hard in our system to just find ways to facilitate gratitude between students that we're helping each other, so that if you help me with learning how to solve two-step equations, I can name the specific things that I really valued about the ways that you were helping me. That's so valuable to that kid who was serving as the coach. But then also just to show measurable gains, like this student you were working with, they grew in their proficiency by 60 points, on a 100-point scale. And that means a lot. Kids just light up and glow. And so if you start to nail some of these really critical ingredients, you can build motivation into the system immediately. And I would say that the very last one that's important, we were doing research in India at one point, and it's design based research, and so we're working with classes and we're trying to figure out how to build systems that are really effective. And what we found was that when we introduced one layer into how we match kids, which is how well do kids work together, all of a sudden every kid started enjoying their sessions more. And we have these fears that if you put two kids who really like each other next to each other to work together, like, oh, they'll be too chatty, they'll get off task. The research actually doesn't bear that out. Like kids don't get off track to the point that you would expect, and they actually end up learning a lot more and being a lot more excited about doing peer coaching work. Like give the kids a situation that they themselves feel comfortable about working with somebody that they work with well, and yeah, those are just like three of the ingredients that we found to be really critical in getting kids immediately bought into the system.
Yeah, and I love what you said early on is talking about norms. Because as adults, when we go to a classroom, we're going to a PD or anything that we do, we know our norms and how we should act, how we should interact with others, and how they're going to interact with us. But I think it's really important for students to understand that because when they walk into our classrooms, they know the norm. They're going to sit there, they're going to do their work, they're going to listen to the teacher and go forth. But now we're adding that additional aspect of now they're working with their peer to learn the content. And so now you've got to really work through that norm of what coaching looks like, not just from the coach, but really how the student receives that coaching, and that conversation needs to go back and forth. And even as I say this, I think about my two children that I had this week. They may get they get fights and they do all these things, and you've got to sit them down and kind of have that conversation. Oh, how did this make you feel? And then, one of my kids will say, and then, all right, now I turn to my other student. All right, now how do you want to respond to that? And so you're really kind of going back and forth and teaching them not just the lingo, the math, but really that communication piece, which I think is just phenomenal to start teaching that at such an early spot in life, especially when it comes to content.
Yeah, definitely. When we do our first session debriefs with teachers after they've had their first peer teach session, the feedback that we hear the most often, this is the most common story I hear, is like, I had no idea that this specific kid or this specific kid had it in them to be a great leader and a great communicator. Like, I didn't know that they could be like an empathetic person that like really takes on the other person's challenges and shows empathy and understanding, and then really works with them to help them. And honestly, they'll also tell me, I didn't know the students understood the math well enough to teach it as effectively as they did. And so when you give kids opportunities, they'll really surprise you with how well they can do in terms of their growth, in terms of you know being leaders and effective communicators. And then when you build a system around training kids to actually do that, and you identify, here are the specific skills that kids need to learn to be able to help other people, and then you create systematic opportunities for them to practice doing those things in like safe virtual spaces where they're just learning the teaching moves. It actually does translate into how they really teach their peers in the real world.
Yeah, I think opportunities are huge, especially, I was a special education teacher for a long time. And you always had these kids that you think they're struggling, they're doing all these things, but when you give them the opportunity to present, you give them opportunity to work with another peer, that's when they really start to surprise you. And then you're like, oh man, I've missed out. And then sometimes that opportunity happens for you as a teacher early on when you have that student. Or if it's on the back end of the year, you're like, man, I've wasted all this time. And just, you have to be open to change. You have to be open to new ideas. And I think that's really what PeerTeach is bringing in that peer evaluation model, is just, you're bringing another concept that sometimes you're just a little more, I guess, afraid to do that, because it's not something like, when I went through school, it's not something that you typically go through in classes, or at least when I went in school 15, 20 years ago. And so it's just a different mindset.
Yeah, it's so common, and I experienced this myself when I was teaching. I was a teacher in Oakland, and I had a lot of rowdy middle school students, and I would be afraid to like let go of the reins sometimes, and just like see what amazing things students can do when you give them a little bit of like you know space and agency to like take things on themselves. And when you create enough structure in the activity, and you train kids on the norms of how to do a good job of interacting within that specific structure, kids will surprise you and inspire you. And once kids have some of these experiences where they themselves didn't realize that they could be like a teacher to their peers, or they didn't see themselves as a math person, and then the system recognized, like, no, like, you're actually doing great on this topic, and we believe that you can teach it to someone else, and then they actually go and do it and do a good job of it and get feedback that they did a good job. It can be transformative for them.
Oh yeah,
It can change how they think about themselves.
it's really a game changer. Now, as we think about PeerTeach, and I know you've co-wrote this paper, Theories of Change and Learning Experiences. How is this? I know there's tons of ideas and things that I pulled from here. And how does this really kind of help? Has this helped you create PeerTeach? When was this kind of your idea of Theories of Change kind of evolved?
Yeah, to give a little bit of background on that. So I was co-running a master's program called the Learning Design Technology program at Stanford for a number of years. I was co-running it alongside the director of the program, Karin Forcell, but I was the person who was running the seminar and teaching, four quarters a year of how to do things like developing theories of change or logic models in order to drive like a systematic design process. At its core, the idea of a theory of change is that you are laying down on paper, here are all of the things that I'm going to input into a situation. Here are all of the environmental and contextual factors that need to be present within a space in order to produce these kinds of outcomes at the end. And it sounds very basic, like here's the inputs, here's the outputs. But the really important aspect is just putting them down on paper, describing why theoretically we expect certain inputs to lead to certain outputs, and then testing all of those connections in a really rigorous and systematic way. And so when I work with students, oftentimes, like the biggest challenge I would say is students would show up and they would have a particular learning mechanism in mind that they were excited about. I want to teach kids with virtual reality. That would be a very, very broader. I want to teach kids using tool X. And when you come at it from the standpoint of like, I'm so excited about this technology or this mechanism, but you're not thinking really intently about here's the specific problem I'm trying to solve, and here are the metrics that will guide me knowing if I'm actually solving it. And here are the specifics that have to do with virtual reality or whatever are the inputs that are going to drive that change. If you don't name those things, draw out those diagrams, and then methodically test everything, oftentimes you end up spinning your wheels and going down paths that are not that effective.
Yeah, it's more that like in the paper you talked about avoiding a scattershot innovation. And I feel like sometimes even whether it's a program or just teaching in general, what you're saying is, we're just kind of pushing something out. Here's this idea. I think it's going to work great. And we just do it. And hopefully that our gains or our formative assessments are going to show that we've done the right job of teaching this content. But really, it's going back through it. Here's my idea. Here's what I'm going to do, and kind of work your process and design your map for it. I think that's huge, and just going back and really diving into that thinking of it.
For sure. And one other point that I'll make, I won't get too into the weeds of how to design using theories of change, but what I will say is that it's really important to see the specific change that you're expecting and that you want to see. Like if what I want to see is I want to increase kids' confidence in math, or I really want to see their self-efficacy rise, whatever the thing is that you want to see. Or it could just be I want their proficiency on math standards increase. If you name those things, and then you expect for inputs X, Y, and Z to lead to that change, before going out and building any of the technology, before building a website, for example, or an app for a phone, I always encourage designers to try to inhabit the technology themselves, to be the technology. And so if you wanted it to do this fancy thing automatically, like, you should be that technology. Use Google Docs, use Google Slides. If you want to have like a chat bot in the system, don't build the chat bot first. You can pretend to be the chat bot yourself, and you can do whatever it is you think the chat bot should be doing. And then make sure that you're able to kind of simulate the experience and see the effect you want before you put any time into building the actual technology.
No, I love that. It's really just, if we're creating a lesson plan, whatever teachers are creating, is to almost like have a practice run for that, and try to experience all the things that could happen, could not happen. That way, when you're actually enrolling something out, then you're kind of prepared for all those things. I love that. That's a great thing. And really, when we think about this, and we can transition back to PeerTeach, but I love that your three kind of keys are, who your learners are, what they're going to learn, and really what our learning goals are. And I feel like, especially when we think about PeerTeach, we know our learners are these we're teaching kids these new norms. We're teaching them how to coach, and then what they're going to learn. We've got our math content, and then really the learning goals, yes, is to highlight their content, to meet those goals and standards that we're teaching, but really to go back to this PeerTeach idea of they're teaching each other. I think based off the things that I've kind of researched and looked up, that's just a huge part of a little piece of a part of your paper, but a whole big part of PeerTeach in general.
Yeah, definitely. So for PeerTeach, we think of ourselves as having this dual mission. One is to make sure every kid understands math better. And then the second is to make sure that kids are effective communicators, that they have the kind of skills that you would need if you're going to go into a job and be a manager and you're going to lead a team of 10 people and you need to communicate with everyone in a way where it's like clear, they understand what they need to do. You're also showing empathy. You're able to have really good like dialogue with people to make them better at whatever they're doing. That's a really critical skill, especially for the 21st century. And so on both of those, we're so diligent about looking at like what is the learning gain of every single tutoring session that kids have. And so we've over the past last school year and this school year, we've facilitated about 30,000 peer tutoring sessions, and across all of those, we've measured pre and post learning. So we know exactly how much learning happened in all of those 30,000 something sessions. And whenever there's a session that doesn't go well, like we analyze it and we figure out like, oh, this was the missing piece that we could do a little bit better. And it's that feedback loop that's constantly leading to small iterations and small improvements that's gotten us to the point where, I'm pretty confident that PeerTeach is the most effective math learning system in the world now. But it takes so much iteration to get there, and like constantly being able to draw on, feedback and metrics from what's happening in real sessions in order to make improvements.
Yeah, and I think that feedback is huge. And I know you're getting that feedback from teachers, but how does that feedback work from when teachers are doing this? How does that feedback work from students? What kind of data have you collected from that? And just what is the more their input of that?
Yeah, every single peer tutoring session, it ends with the feedback of one, how much did the kid who was initially struggling learn? Like, what was their starting place? Where are they at now? And right now, like typical proficiency growth goes up by about 120, 125% from a single peer teach session. And it's a complicated number to kind of grasp, but if your proficiency was about 30% on a topic before, it goes up to close to 70%, after a 15-minute peer tutoring session. And so the system is really effective in that way. Um, the other data beyond just how much did they learn is students rate the session. They rate like, what was the quality of your learning session, 1 to 5. And so we get like that very concrete metric. And we tend to, we look at it very closely. Early days, we averaged about 3.8. We steadily go up, and now average is about 4.2 out of 5. And so we're in the sessions that don't go well, like we learn from them, and then we improve the system to facilitate better sessions. And then we also have students reflect on their own learning. So what was the highlight of the session? What did my peer do really well that helped me? But also, what could we have done better to make it a better peer tutoring session? Kids do that kind of reflection after every single tutoring session, which allows they themselves to figure out this is how we can improve things in the future. But it also gives really valuable data to us as a team on like, okay, this is what went well, this is what didn't go well in the session. And then the last thing that we're actually going to release it really soon. We're really excited about it. We've been building an intelligent system that can listen to students teaching each other and make sense of what's going well and what students aren't doing well. And then we can produce a list of here's the strengths and weaknesses of every kid in terms of how they were interacting, their level of participation, their mathematical discourse, and then we can give that feedback to the students and to the teacher. And so that's kind of the next big release on the horizon that we're very excited about.
Wow, that's pretty incredible. I think just the way technology is pushing, especially with AI out here, that's just incredible for it to be able to listen, to analyze that conversation, and then for you on the back end to figure out, hey, this went really well, this didn't really go really well, and now that teacher can go back and continue to coach them. And even when I think about feedback I think is something that, yes, we're doing those assessments on paper or a quiz or those type of things, but for a student to be able to say, hey, I've coached my peer, we've worked through this problem, but being able to rate themselves, I think is just incredible. That is just a huge part of just students understanding their strengths. Because I know we do that as educators. Hey, I've had this lesson, I got observed, we have a post-observation, I kind of walk with my admin of things I did well and I didn't do well. And during that conversation, any conversation I've ever had, it's like, ooh, like I missed the mark on this one, but you don't ever realize that until you start that feedback process. And I feel like that's another great aspect of this program for students to start that early on, being able to rate themselves, to be able to have that feedback. I think that's huge.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing I'll say is that, like we've tested every version of feedback that kids can give each other, and like how do you have kids do this type of reflection in a way that feels safe and not scary, and it doesn't create anxiety, but it leads to improvement. And we found that when you lean into highlighting the things that they were doing really well, so that they know, like, oh, this thing that I was doing, it was really appreciated by the other student, and the system recognizes that, like, I'm doing an amazing job of asking eliciting questions, or I'm doing a really good job of doing clarification. Like when we're not on the same page, like I've been doing a great job of clarifying with the other student. And when the system like does positive reinforcement of the things you're doing well, I think it makes kids a little bit more open to hearing, and here's something you can try in your next session to do even better. Um, and so that, yeah, it's an aspect of the system that we feel like is really powerful.
Yeah, and I love that you're so passionate about this PeerTeach, because I've shared, so there's some similar programs out there. Short answer, and I know you're really good friends with Adam, and so I love that, because I've shared programs like this with other teachers, and when they first see it, they're always like, all right, so just another program to do things. But then when I get to the peer involvement part, or that peer reflecting and that feedback, you can see it in their eyes, you can see their wheels turning, and it's just a different aspect of what we're bringing to the table as educators with these programs that are out here. And as we go down to this PeerTeach, or just not PeerTeach, I know your program's called PeerTeach, but just this peer involvement, it is now time for our famous Tech Flush tip of the day. Are you ready for this?
Sure, yeah. Lay it on me.
Yeah. Now, with being so passionate about peer teaching and peers helping each other, I know you've had to dig into this and done some research and really why this is so beneficial, instead of knowing that, hey, when people talk together, we're communicating and we're going to achieve a better goal that way. But really, why is this peer model so important?
Ooh, good question. So my field is the learning sciences, um, and something that we've known for a long time in this field is that the process of teaching someone else is incredibly powerful for your own learning. And there's all these mechanisms through which you learn so much by teaching other people. One of them is like when you prepare to teach, you learn the material a lot better. We've been running these studies for decades that show that if you tell a person you have a test on Friday, um, we want you to study this material. If you tell a different person, you need to teach someone this content on Friday, you need to study this material. The person who you told to teach someone else, they tend to learn the material better, and they end up doing better on the assessments. We learn content in a deeper, more impactful way when we're expecting to teach someone. So there's that preparation phase. The process of actually teaching someone else, like verbalizing your thoughts, it forces you to organize your thinking on a subject. The process of listening to another person as they're solving a problem and doing error management or scaffolding, it's a type of higher order thinking that makes you think more deeply about content. And so there's all these different mechanisms that are really powerful in getting one kid to teach another that we should be building off of. And just in general, we've known for a long time that tutoring is the most powerful way for anybody to learn. We've known since 1984, the first Benjamin Bloom studies on tutoring that showed that the average tutored kid learns more than 98% of their peers. We've known since then that tutoring is the most powerful learning intervention in the world, but it's really expensive. And to bring adults into a classroom to work with kids one on one, it's logistically challenging. They have to do fingerprinting. It's annoying. You have to like find space in the school to set kids up. Like when you can give kids all the tools that they would need to be effective tutors for each other within the classroom space, it's logistically simple, it's inexpensive, and kids love it. Kids love the process of helping each other. We're kind of innately creatures that want to help, each other succeed. I think it was bred into us through evolution. And yeah, so at a high level, those are a lot of the reasons why I think it's just really important to lean into peer interaction. when we do it willy-nilly and we just set up kids to work with each other, oftentimes it doesn't go that well and it can scare us away from doing that work in the future. But when you have really good systems for training kids on how to interact with each other, and then you have really good structures for the actual activities, kids love it and they really benefit.
Yeah, and even as you're talking, I'm thinking about in my current role as an innovation specialist or instructional technology coach. And when I go to these PDs, a lot of times, you may see people or like a conference, here's my slides, I'm going to walk you through each step and kind of it's more of a presentation style. But I really enjoy on my side teaching to where I've prepared the content. I may have some slides because people like to see those. They like to have the information. But doing a live demo or going through a process like earlier this week, I'm talking with a teacher about an AI website. We're walking through how to create like present levels of performance, thing for her IEPs. And for me to sit down and kind of walk through the thoughts that are in my head as a previous special education teacher and be able to have that conversation with her and work through the prompting and work all those things and just setting, here's your just concrete, this is what you should type and don't worry about anything else. Just for her to see my thoughts and to verbalize those more, I think that's a great skill to have as an adult. And then now you're building on this as kids are, early as elementary school, middle school, then high school, and they're continuing to build on this. And then you think when they do become adults, they're in college or they're in their workforce, their communication ability and just being able to work with others to achieve a common goal, those skills are going to be outrageously good.
Yeah, so helpful. And a lot of people learn too late in life how to be an effective like manager and collaborator with others. That's why we've been in a lot of annoying workspaces with people that don't, play nice with other adults because they probably didn't
Yeah.
get good training on how to do it when they were a kid. They didn't get practice opportunities where they were able to like coach some virtual character on how to do math problems and getting feedback on how they could be a better coach and then taking those learnings and then applying them with with a peer the next day. They probably didn't have that kind of opportunity.
No, and I think sometimes, I don't remember having those opportunities when I was in school. It's been more of a later in life thing. But again, like if we can set these kids up for success now, whether it's AI, whether it's peer teaching, whether it's a program, whatever it may be, like we're setting them up for success, especially when they get older and then they're in the workforce. I think it's just phenomenal.
Yeah, I totally agree.
All right. Well, cool. Well, awesome. Well, listen, it has been awesome talking today. I think PeerTeach is just an incredible program. And I know we didn't talk necessarily all the details of like the assessments and those type of things, but I feel like those are pretty, not general, but that's easier for someone to walk through. But I think the highlight of the whole program, again, what we've really been talking about this whole episode is the peer collaboration, having those new norms and having students communicate with each other. I think that's really the emphasis on your program.
Yeah, definitely. And whether you're using piece of technology like PeerTeach or you're just designing your classroom around kids helping each other, I think for people to kind of internalize some of these important ideas is really important that it matters who you pair kids up with. Like you should be really thoughtful about it because kids don't want to just open up and be vulnerable with anyone. So being mindful of how you pair kids, using a systematic process that tracks which kids need help on things, which kids are in a position to help others, and then be able to track the learning gains and then share them with everybody involved. Those are just some fundamental ingredients that any teacher can try to take on in their own classroom, and I hope that as many teachers as possible do, because having evaluated different math interventions and different pieces of technology for a lot of years at this point, I think this is the best way for kids to learn math. And as you mentioned before, I'm very passionate about it.
Yes, we can totally tell you're passionate about it. And I love that you highlighted that you don't necessarily need a program for peer teaching. Because, there's lots of resources, whether it's Think, Pair, Share, we've got all our activities, we're pairing up, and those are things that we can do outside of this program to really harness what our students are learning and collaborate with each other. But, again, with this program, it's already set up, it's designed for that, and it really gives those teachers the tools to help support their students in that.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Well, cool. Well, listen, Dr. Soren Rosier, I appreciate you coming on to the show today. I think this was awesome. And listen, I don't remember if we said this, but this is the first live video that we've done. I'm super excited about it. It's something I've been wanting to do for the Tech Flush for a long time. And you were the number one. So that's pretty exciting. That's something to be ecstatic about, I guess.
Yeah, as we talked about before, I'm going to go brag to Adam Sparks that I was the first video podcast.
Yes, you do
on
it,
the
'cause
Tech Flush.
I've talked to him a lot of times about it, but I'm glad you were there. We were number one. So, well, awesome. Well, cool. Now, listen, before we wrap up, how can we stay in touch with you? Are you on any socials? How can follow you and those type of things?
Yeah, just follow our progress at peerteach.org. That's the best way. That's how you can learn about the system. That's how you can get in touch with us. Honestly, we love working with any math teacher, just giving you tips so that you can succeed, or providing you with a platform to kind of build your class around peer tutoring. Just go to peerteach.org, reach out, and we'd love to connect.
Yeah, on the website, I know we're wrapping up, but I know on the website, it was so easy to go on there and really just see the involvement, each step and how it goes. You've got some videos on there, just an incredible layout, great resource for teachers, especially those math teachers, to go out there and just kind of see the process.
I appreciate you saying that. My background is as a researcher. Like I'm an academic and a teacher at heart, and so building a platform that's like smooth for people to use, taken a lot of years to get there, and we have finally gotten there where people can pick up the system really easily and just see benefit right away.
Well, awesome. Well, cool. Well, again, thank you for being on the show. Remember, you can follow me at Josh_Morris65 on Twitter, X. You can follow the show at the Tech Flush on Twitter. We got Facebook, Instagram, all those fun things. Have you heard of this new, speaking of social things, have you heard of this new Blue Sky app?
Yeah, it's where all the liberals are headed when they're fleeing from X.
Yes, that's what I've heard. We're fleeing to another platform. So I don't know if we'll dive into that one or not. I don't think I can handle one more program. But awesome. Well, listen, I appreciate you being on the show. I think this was incredible, and I look forward to having you back on. I think it's going to be awesome.
I'd love to be back on, especially after we release this new exciting feature where we can listen to every conversation students are having and then give them really specific coaching after every single peer coaching session. I would love to share with you how that's gone, because it's an exciting new adventure for us.
Yeah, that's going to be awesome. Just one extra part of that feedback is just going to be incredible for those kids and teachers. I'm really looking forward to seeing that, and then we'll talk some more.
That sounds great. Thanks for having me on, John.
Awesome. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for joining us today on the Tech Flush podcast. Stay tech savvy, keep those gadgets charged, and remember, teachers and technology go hand in hand, connecting students to a world of knowledge for an electrifying learning experience. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and spread the word about the Tech Flush to your friends. Catch all episodes on Apple Podcasts. See you next time on the Tech Flush.